The night was silent, too silent. The twin moons cast a pale glow over the city of Erithel, its spires reflecting the gleam of distant stars. There, amidst the gleaming glass towers and endless stretches of darkened streets, Captain Alicia Hawke stood alone. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she watched the swirling clouds overhead. Something was wrong. The air felt different, stale, almost suffocating. A sharp crack broke the stillness. A figure emerged from the shadows. Alicia. The voice was low, raspy. She turned, eyes narrowing. Sergeant Balin stood there, his face drawn and weary. His uniform, usually crisp, was wrinkled from days of travel. He held out a data pad, the glowing screen flickering erratically. "What's wrong?" Alicia asked, her voice tight, though she already knew. The unease, the weight of something impending, it had been building for weeks. "There's a message," Balin said. "From the Council." Alicia took the pad, her fingers brushing against his as she grabbed it. The words flashed across the screen, just as she feared. Asterisk. Emergency protocol initiated. Hostile forces approaching. Immediate evacuation required. Asterisk. Her heart dropped. The message was too vague, too precise. Hostile forces? The Sithar Empire had remained quiet for decades, their borders unchanged, their ambitions unknown. Yet, here it was, a direct threat, and the Council's request for evacuation seemed more like a command to flee. "Where?" she asked, already heading towards the command center. "Sector 16. Outpost Delta." The comms were jammed. "We don't know exactly what's going on," Balin explained, following her closely. Alicia's mind raced. She had been a soldier for years, since before the rebellion. Her instinct was to fight, not run. But even she couldn't ignore the warning signs. There was something primal in the air now, an electric charge that had nothing to do with technology. They reached the command center in seconds. The room was bustling with activity, flashing holograms and voices of officers shouting orders. Alicia barely noticed any of it, her eyes scanning the central display. The colors were wrong, too sharp, too frantic. It wasn't a drill. "Captain, we've been tracking them," an officer called out, urgency in their voice. "Unknown ships entering our space, fast." A map of the surrounding systems appeared on the screen, marking the incoming fleet with red dots. Each one grew larger by the second. Alicia's gut tightened. This wasn't a simple skirmish, this was an invasion. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. The officer paused, her fingers flying across the console. 2 hours. Too fast. Alicia's voice was strained. "We need to act now. This isn't just a raid. They're coming for the core. We're pulling the civilian transports out of orbit," the officer replied. "But we can't hold off an entire fleet alone. We need the defense stations online, now." Alicia's hands clenched. "Get them operational. I'll take the fighters." The officer hesitated, glancing at the others in the room. "Captain, we—" "Don't question me," she snapped, already moving to the exit. "I'm not about to let them waltz in and take us without a fight." Balin caught up with her as they moved into the hangar. A dozen fighters were lined up, their sleek forms catching the dim light. Alicia's eyes zeroed in on the lead craft, a custom-modified Raptor class, her pride and joy. She slapped her hand onto the side, signaling the technician to prepare it for launch. Balin approached her. "Are you sure about this? You're taking a single fighter against a whole fleet?" Alicia didn't look at him. Her focus remained on the fighter. "They won't be expecting it. That's why it's going to work. You can't do this alone," he insisted. "Let us help." Alicia's eyes met his, her expression hard as steel. "This isn't a discussion." She climbed into the cockpit, securing herself in the seat as the console lit up. The ship hummed to life, its systems running diagnostics, scanning for enemy signals. She pushed the throttle forward, the hangar doors opened, and the fighter shot out into the cold void of space. The stars stretched into infinity, a stark contrast to the storm brewing behind her. The enemy fleet was still out of view, but Alicia's heart pounded in anticipation. She had faced enemies before, had led others into battle countless times. But this felt different. The ship rocketed towards the edge of the system, the feeling of weightlessness taking her breath away for a moment. Alicia focused on the task at hand. No matter what was coming, she would face it head on. Her thoughts were interrupted by a flash of light on the radar. Ships. The fleet was closing in fast. Alicia cursed under her breath, turning the fighter on a sharp vector toward them. The transmission screen crackled to life with the distorted voice of the fleet commander. "This is Fleet Commander Rylak of the Scyther Empire. You are ordered to stand down immediately. Failure to comply will result in immediate obliteration." Alicia's lips twisted into a grim smile. "Not today!" Her hands gripped the controls tightly as she locked on to the lead ship, an imposing dreadnought that had already opened fire on the nearby defense station. She throttled forward, her ship weaving between the incoming blasts, each one narrowly missing her. The fighter hummed with raw power as she activated the missile systems. One by one, the missiles shot out, streaking through the blackness towards their targets. Explosions erupted across the dark expanse as she took down the first few ships. But more kept coming, overwhelming the defenses. The magnitude of the attack hit her all at once. It wasn't just an invasion, it was a declaration of war. But who had provoked them? And why now? She gritted her teeth, adrenaline surging through her veins. She had no answers, but she would keep fighting until she found them. "This is just the beginning," Alicia muttered, steering the ship into another dive, locking on to her next target. The fleet was massive, but so was her resolve. This was not how humanity would fall. Not on her watch. Her eyes blazed with fury, and she dove deeper into the battle. The spark had been lit, and she wasn't about to let it burn out. The radio crackled to life with an urgent tone. "Captain Hawk, report!" The voice was clipped, panicked. Alicia's grip tightened on the controls as her fighter screamed through space, evading laser fire and missiles. Her ship shuddered with each near miss, the hull groaning as the void outside swallowed the distant explosions. "Status?" Balin's voice was a calm anchor in the chaos. "Barely keeping them off," Alicia replied, her eyes flicking to the radar. The fleet had spread out, encircling the system with a lethal precision she hadn't expected. "I need more time. You're going to have to hold them at the station." "Captain." His voice faltered. There was fear there, thick and unmistakable. She didn't need to hear more. The station was lost. She knew it, he knew it. "Balin," she said, cutting him off. "I'm already on my way to their flagship. You won't have much longer." The fighter sped toward the heart of the fleet, the massive dreadnought looming like a shadow. It was a hulking beast, bristling with firepower and defensive shields, and it was moving toward the civilian sector, Alicia's home. A fleet this large didn't simply appear overnight. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone knew where humanity's vulnerabilities lay. The ship lurched, and a warning light blared from her console. A missile lock. She gritted her teeth and yanked the fighter into a sharp roll, narrowly avoiding the blast. The force nearly tore the fighter apart, but she steadied it with a practiced hand. This wasn't her first battle. She couldn't afford it to be her last. She cut through the swarm of smaller ships, her ship dancing in and out of the asteroid belt that surrounded the enemy dreadnought. Each passing moment felt like a countdown, a pressure building, the tension palpable in the airless void. Another message blinked across the comms. "Fleet Commander Rylak to Captain Hawk. Surrender now, and your people will be spared. Resist, and your planet will be eradicated." Alicia didn't hesitate. "No deal," she muttered under her breath. She activated her fighter's auxiliary thrusters, closing the distance between her and the dreadnought. Prepare to die. But the ship's systems were lagging. The hull was pitted with scorch marks from the smaller crafts, and her systems were starting to show signs of wear. If she didn't take out the dreadnought soon, it would be too late. Her comms buzzed again. "Captain, we have incoming reinforcements. Another fleet, far larger than the last. We won't hold them off much longer. Tell the council to prepare for a full-scale evacuation, Alicia snapped. The words felt hollow, a bitter realization sinking into her chest. She had failed to protect them. Her people. Balin's voice was tight, strained. Captain, there's something else. The council received intel. The Scyther fleet isn't just here for conquest. They've activated something. What do you mean? Alicia demanded, her mind racing. We think it's a weapon. Balin's voice was almost a whisper. A weapon that could wipe out everything in the system. No one knows how they got it, but it's here. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The Scyther had always been ruthless, but this was different. A weapon that could erase an entire system? She felt the weight of the universe crashing down on her. Humanity had long believed they were strong enough, smart enough to withstand any attack. They had underestimated their enemies, their arrogance blinding them. Damn it, she muttered, punching a few keys on the console. I don't care what they've got. I'll stop them. As if answering her defiance, the dreadnought unleashed a barrage of fire, forcing her to swerve and dive. The asteroids around her exploded as the missiles collided with them, sending debris scattering in every direction. One rock struck her wing, and the fighter jerked violently. She cursed under her breath, her fingers flying over the control panel as sparks showered her cockpit. But her gaze remained fixed on the massive, weaponized behemoth ahead. I'm coming for you, she whispered, gripping the controls tighter. Alicia's fighter swerved toward the dreadnought's underbelly, where a weak spot had been marked in the intelligence reports. Her ship's targeting system locked onto the ship's main reactor. A single well-placed shot could destabilize the entire vessel. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She locked onto the reactor, her mind going cold, calculating the trajectory of her next move. The weapon systems came online, and she fired. A burst of energy exploded from her ship's weapons, streaking toward the enemy dreadnought. The explosion lit up space for miles around. For a moment, Alicia allowed herself a breath. Then, an alert blared, warning, incoming fire. The dreadnought's shields were still intact, and she had only grazed the surface. One more shot. But as she prepared to strike again, a new enemy ship appeared, cutting through the asteroid belt like a blade through flesh. This ship was massive, even larger than the dreadnought. Alicia's heart sank. The reinforcements had arrived, and they were no longer just facing a fight, they were facing annihilation. Alicia's eyes narrowed, scanning the new ship as it positioned itself between her and the dreadnought. The new ship's weaponry was more advanced, its shields glowing a menacing red. The odds had just become impossible. She pulled back, hitting the afterburners, trying to outmaneuver the incoming threat. The comms crackled again. Captain, Balin's voice, now tinged with fear. We've lost contact with the station. They've breached the outer defenses. We're running out of time. She didn't respond. Her eyes were glued to the new ship, its weapons powering up. The weight of failure was suffocating, yet she knew she couldn't afford to dwell on it. There was no time to mourn. She had to act, before it was too late. Her ship barreled forward, dodging the barrage of missiles aimed her way. She wasn't sure how long she could keep this up. All she knew was one thing: humanity was on the brink of extinction, and she was the only one standing between it and oblivion. The descent into the unknown had begun, and there was no turning back. The stars flickered like distant memories as Alicia's fighter spiraled through the inky void, the alien fleet closing in. She had become a blur, a streak of motion amidst an endless abyss, her only goal now to reach the heart of the dreadnought. Every second was a countdown, a race against time. Her targeting systems hummed, calculating trajectories, but the distance between her and the enemy's core remained unnervingly wide. A flash of light tore through the darkness as a missile whizzed past her wing. The blast sent shockwaves rippling through the fighter, rattling her bones. Her stomach lurched. It wasn't just the missiles she had to avoid. It was the overwhelming weight of what had already been lost. The Council had been wrong. They had underestimated the Scyther Empire's resolve. She had underestimated them. Alicia, you have to pull back. Balin's voice crackled through her comms, his panic rising like a crescendo. You're taking too many risks. The fleet. I don't have a choice, she snapped, her knuckles white on the control panel. Her eyes never left the dreadnought. Tell the council to prepare to evacuate. It's their only chance now. The words hung between them, an unspeakable finality to them. She had failed them before, but this time, there was no turning back. Her fighter jerked as another hit from the enemy's fire tore through her shields. Sparks erupted, cascading across the cockpit. Her breath caught in her throat, but her resolve only hardened. She could feel the weight of the decision building within her chest. She had known from the beginning that this wasn't a battle she would walk away from. A flicker of light. Her sensors beeped wildly, pulling her from her thoughts. The fleet was closing in, too fast. She had only moments to act. Lock onto the reactor, Alicia ordered herself, her voice calm despite the storm in her heart. Just one shot. One clean shot, and we'll have a chance. Her fingers danced over the console, activating the final systems that would launch the assault. As her fighter locked onto the reactor of the enemy dreadnought, she steadied her breath. But the universe had its own plans. Warning! The ship's systems buzzed. New threat detected. Incoming heavy artillery. Her eyes widened. She wasn't prepared for this. A colossal warship materialized from behind the asteroid belt. Its weapons glowed a deep red, each of them more formidable than anything she had encountered before. The energy surge from its weapons lit up the blackness, and before she could react, the first shot collided with her ship. Alicia's body slammed back into the seat as the fighter's hull screamed under the impact. The force of the hit sent her tumbling through the cockpit, the world spinning as alarms screamed in her ears. The fighter tilted uncontrollably. Her hand gripped the control column, trying to steady the fighter, but the damage was done. Her view was obscured by flashes of red lights, and the cockpit was filled with an overwhelming hum of systems failing. But she wasn't dead. Not yet. Another hit, and another. The missiles rained down in a brutal symphony of destruction. Her shields were all but gone. Panic clawed at her chest, but she fought it down. This was the moment. This was what she had trained for. Alicia! Alicia, are you? Balin's voice came through the comms, thick with concern. I'm still here, she rasped, forcing the words out. Tell the fleet to divert. I'm taking out the reactor. Don't stop. They need to know what we're facing. She didn't give him time to respond. The fighter spun, one final roll that sent her flying past the incoming fire. A controlled burn ignited in her engines, sending the fighter into an evasive course toward the reactor's core. Her mind was cold, calculating, every movement sharp, every maneuver desperate. There was no room for hesitation. She locked onto the core. One shot, she whispered. Just one. Her heart thundered in her chest as her fingers hovered over the firing controls. The enemy dreadnought, now fully aware of her position, turned its guns toward her, launching everything it had left. It was a direct hit. She was certain of it. The explosion was so violent, so complete, that the world seemed to disappear in a single, blinding instant. Except, when the light faded, she was still alive. The fighter's systems were gone. The cockpit had cracked open, exposing her to the cold, unforgiving void of space. There was no gravity. No sound. But there was the absolute certainty of one thing: the dreadnought was no more. She had done it. But there was no victory. No exhilaration. Only the overwhelming silence that swallowed her whole. Her comms crackled again. Alicia! Balin's voice broke through the static. Alicia, talk to me. What's your status? For a moment, she didn't answer. She was staring into the remnants of the dreadnought, watching as its massive form crumbled and fragmented under the force of her last shot. The pieces of its once mighty structure scattered across space, leaving only the faintest trail of destruction in its wake. I've destroyed it, she said, her voice hollow. The reactor. It's gone. Balin was silent for a beat, and then, "We lost a lot, didn't we?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The battle had cost them too much. The evacuation was underway, but the fleet was shattered. The civilian ships had fled, but they were not out of danger. And the Scyther Empire still had its sights on them. She reached for the emergency thrusters, but the controls had been fried. It was a miracle she had survived the explosion, but she knew this was just the beginning. "Captain, we need to regroup." Balin's voice was urgent. "The Scyther are relentless. We need to figure out how to stop them before they finish what they started." Alicia closed her eyes, her hands shaking slightly. "I don't know if we can stop them," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "But we will keep fighting. No matter what." Her fighter drifted into the blackness. The first light of dawn was far away, if it would ever come at all. And with that, Alicia Hawke realized the fight was only just beginning. The breaking point had passed, but the war was far from over. Alicia Hawke floated in the vast emptiness, her body suspended in her fighter's fractured cockpit. The remnants of the battle burned across her vision, fires in the distance, the remains of enemy ships scattered like shattered glass. The Scyther fleet, though decimated by her strike, wasn't finished yet. And neither was she. Her pulse echoed in her ears. She couldn't feel her limbs, couldn't remember the last time she took a breath, but she knew one thing: she had to keep moving. The comms crackled again. "Alicia," Balin's voice came through, crackling and distant. "The Council wants to know, what's our next move?" She swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak through the disorientation. "We regroup. We hit them where it hurts. We don't stop until they're wiped out. We've lost most of the fleet. We barely have enough ships to make a dent," Balin responded. "The remaining ships are being overwhelmed by reinforcements. We need you." Her hand slammed onto the console, activating the emergency thrusters. The fighter lurched forward with a burst of power, sending her hurtling toward the closest friendly ship. The effort was like dragging her body through thick, invisible water, but she kept her focus. There was no time for hesitation. The fleet was losing ground, and if she didn't act, everything she had fought for would be meaningless. She couldn't let that happen. Her fighter's broken systems slowly came online, the ship responding sluggishly to her commands. The air was stale, and the faint hum of power surging through the damaged hull was the only sound. Then, another burst of static in her comms. "Captain, we've got company," a voice shouted. She didn't need to ask who it was. Balin again. "There's no way we're going to outrun them. We need to stop them now." Alicia's fingers flew over the controls, trying to recalibrate the ship's sensors. She couldn't afford another hit. If they came at her now, she would be finished. "I know." Her voice was low, filled with grit. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." The looming shadow of the enemy flagship appeared in front of her on the radar, massive, intimidating, and utterly relentless. It was coming straight for her, a dark force in the endless void of space. The flagship's weapons glowed a sickly red, ready to vaporize anything that stood in its way. Alicia's eyes narrowed. The fleet had tried to fight back, but the odds were too steep. Only one option remained. "Prepare to launch the assault," she ordered, her voice firm. "We're going in." There was no more room for hesitation. The only way to end this was to take the fight directly to the heart of the enemy. "Captain, this isn't a fight we can win," Balin warned, his voice filled with concern. "We don't have the firepower to." "I don't care," Alicia cut him off. "This ends now. If I have to do it alone, I will." The flagship's main cannon powered up. Time seemed to freeze. Alicia slammed the throttle forward, pushing the fighter into a reckless dive toward the flagship. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat a reminder of the cost of this war, of every life that had been lost, and of every decision that had led them to this point. As the flagship's firepower rained down on her, her hands danced over the controls with a precision born of desperation. The fighter weaved and twisted, narrowly avoiding incoming blasts. Her mind sharpened, every decision clear, every calculation precise. She couldn't afford to fail. The moment was drawing near. She locked onto the flagship's weak point, the core reactor. The ship was massive, but its defenses weren't invulnerable. The area around the core was heavily shielded, but with the right angle, a single shot could pierce through. Now or never, she whispered, as her finger hovered over the launch button. Balan's voice came through again, shaky this time. Alicia, please come back. We can figure this out together. She didn't have time to respond. There was no room for second thoughts, no space for regret. If she hesitated, everything would be lost. She fired. A blast of energy surged from her fighter's weapons, streaking toward the core of the enemy flagship. The shot was perfect, slicing through the shields and slamming into the reactor with a force that lit up the void like a supernova. For a moment, Alicia's fighter was bathed in the fiery light of the explosion. The entire ship trembled, its hull cracking as the blast ripped through it. But even as the enemy flagship began to break apart, Alicia knew that the fight wasn't over. The Scyther Empire had too many resources, too many forces at their disposal. This was just one victory. The war would go on. Her ship was spiraling out of control, the damage from the blast sending her into a violent spin. The controls were unresponsive. She tried to steady the fighter, but it was no use. The damage was too severe. Alicia, Balan's voice, quieter now, filled with a kind of resignation. You did it. You saved us. She didn't respond. Her vision blurred, the stars spinning around her as her fighter tumbled through space. There was no escape from this moment. The reality of her sacrifice was sinking in. She had given everything for this, her life, her people, her future. And yet, as the fighter hurtled toward the endless void, one thought echoed in her mind. Humanity would survive. Her eyes closed for a brief moment, the weight of everything she had carried lifting for just a second. The war was far from over, but the first step had been taken. The spark of resistance had ignited something that could never be extinguished. Hold on, she whispered to herself, her breath shallow. There's always more to fight for. The screen before her flickered, and then, nothing. The ship's system shut down completely, plunging her into a cold, quiet darkness. But the war, the struggle, and the hope, those things would burn forever, even in the silence of the void. And with that final thought, Alicia Hawke drifted into the unknown,